Have you ever poured your soul into something, sacrificed everything, only to be shoved aside for someone who's never had to try? Have you ever stood before a mirror and asked yourself, why doesn't justice come for me? This isn't a story about pain. It's a meticulously crafted blueprint for revenge, calculated down to every step, every breath. The day they handed my position to that 26-year-old trust fund baby, something inside me didn't break. It crystallized into something far more dangerous. My name is Amelia Hartman. And until 3 weeks ago, I was somebody. At 34, I'd clawed my way up to senior project director at North Point Strategies, one of Riverton's most prestigious media consulting firms. 10 years of 60-hour weeks, missed birthdays, and sacrificed relationships had finally paid off. Or so I thought. The morning it happened started like any other. I arrived at our glass tower on Madison Avenue at 6:45 a.m., beating even the security guard's shift change. My heels clicked against the marble lobby floor with the confidence of someone who belonged there. My reflection in the elevator doors showed a woman in control, sharp blazer, perfect posture, eyes that meant business. The email was waiting in my inbox, marked urgent from Richard Holbrook, our CEO. Please see me in my office at 8 a.m. Bring your current project files. I remember thinking it was about the Morrison Industries campaign. We'd just landed them as a client, largely thanks to my 3-month courtship of their executives. Perhaps Richard wanted to personally congratulate me, maybe even discuss that vice president position that had been vacant for months. At 8 a.m. sharp, I knocked on his corner office door. Richard sat behind his mahogany desk, his expression unreadable. Beside him stood Helen from HR, clutching a manila folder. That should have been my first warning. Amelia, please sit, Richard said, not meeting my eyes. The words that followed felt like they were happening to someone else. Restructuring. New direction. Your position has been eliminated. The phrases floated in the air like toxic smoke, but the real knife came when he added, Lila Porter will be taking over your projects and assuming the newly created role of Strategic Development Director. Lila Porter, 26 years old, 6 months with the company. Her main qualification, being the daughter of Thomas Porter, former board member and Richard's golf buddy from the country club. I'd trained her myself when she started, watched her fumble through basic presentations, corrected her amateur mistakes on budget projections. This is effective immediately, Helen chirped, sliding a separation agreement across the table. We're offering you a transition role in our research department. Same benefits, adjusted compensation. Adjusted? That meant a 40% pay cut and a windowless office on the 3rd floor, where they put people they wanted to forget about, where careers went to die. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I signed the papers with the same steady hand that had closed million-dollar deals. But inside, something fundamental shifted. The naive belief that hard work meant something, that merit mattered. It shattered like safety glass, leaving sharp edges everywhere. The walk to my office, former office, felt like a funeral procession. Colleagues averted their eyes. Some already knew. News travels fast in glass towers. I packed 10 years into a cardboard box, awards, photos from company retreats, the nameplate I'd been so proud of when they first engraved it. As I waited for the elevator, Lila appeared, all bouncing blonde curls and designer shoes she hadn't earned. Amelia, I just heard. I want you to know I had no idea this was happening. If there's anything I can do. I looked at her, really looked at her. The practiced concern, the artificial sweetness. She knew. Of course she knew. This had probably been planned for months, orchestrated over dinner parties and private club meetings I'd never be invited to. Actually, there is something, I said, my voice steady as granite. Remember everything I taught you. You're going to need it. The elevator doors closed on her confused expression. As I descended, watching the floor numbers drop like my career prospects, I made a decision. They thought they were demoting me to irrelevance. They thought I would quietly accept my place in the shadows. They had no idea what they'd just created. In that elevator, carrying my cardboard box of memories, I wasn't planning my resignation letter. I was planning something far more intricate, They'd changed the rules of the game, fine. But they'd forgotten one crucial detail. I'd been playing this game longer, and I'd learned from the best. The late morning Riverton sun hit my face as I exited the building. The city bustled around me, indifferent to my personal catastrophe. But I wasn't looking for sympathy. I was looking for opportunity. And in that moment, standing on that sidewalk with my professional life in a box, I smiled for the first time that day. This wasn't an ending. This was reconnaissance. The research department was exactly as humiliating as they'd intended. Third floor, northwest corner, where the air conditioning barely worked and the fluorescent lights flickered like a horror movie. My new office was a cubicle next to the printer room. Every time someone made copies, the walls vibrated. 3 weeks in, and I'd cataloged every indignity. The 58% pay cut. Helen had lied about 40. The pitying looks from former subordinates. The way conversations stopped when I entered the break room. But the worst part was watching Lila butcher everything I'd built. From my cubicle, I could access the shared drives. I watched her fumble the Morrison Industries presentation, mixing up market demographics and quoting year-old statistics. The client gave us another chance, but I knew they were shopping around. My 10 years of relationship building destroyed in 3 weeks of incompetence. At home, my apartment felt smaller. A one-bedroom in Riverton's east side that had seemed charming when I could afford it now felt like a prison. The mortgage payment loomed like a monthly reminder of my fall. I'd already canceled my gym membership, sold the designer bags I'd rewarded myself with after successful campaigns. "You need to just quit," Marcus said over dinner at our usual Italian place, though we'd switched from wine to water. My boyfriend of 2 years, a software developer who'd never understood the corporate world's brutal politics. "This is killing you, Amelia." "And do what?" I pushed pasta around my plate, appetite gone. Who's going to hire a 34-year-old director who got demoted to research assistant? They'll all know something's wrong. Then sue them. It's obviously discrimination. It's nepotism, not discrimination, completely legal. I'd already consulted my friend Janet, a labor attorney. Besides, lawsuits take years and destroy your reputation. No one hires the woman who sued her last employer. Marcus reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I saw it in his eyes, the dimming respect, the growing frustration. He'd fallen for a powerful woman, not this diminished version. We both knew we were on borrowed time. The breaking point came the following Tuesday. I was filing quarterly reports, work an intern could do, when my computer pinged. An email from Lila to the entire management team, sent accidentally to the all-staff list. "Don't worry about the Morrison hiccup. Daddy's golf friend at Apex Industries is interested. Sometimes it's not what you know. Drinks tonight to celebrate, my treat. Well, Daddy's treat, LOL." The casual admission of everything I'd suspected, the emoji, the lol. 10 years of my professional life reduced to a joke between nepotism beneficiaries. My hands shook as I screenshotted the email before she could recall it. That night, Marcus didn't come over. His texts grew shorter, less frequent. My sister called from Seattle, concern dripping through the phone. "Mom's worried about you. She says you sound different." Different. I caught my reflection in my laptop screen. Hollow cheeks, dark circles that concealer couldn't hide. 3 weeks of humiliation had carved something away, but what remained was harder, sharper. I started staying late, not to work. There was nothing meaningful to do, but to study. I accessed project histories, downloaded client correspondence, mapped the power structure of North Point like a general planning an invasion. Lila's weakness wasn't just incompetence, it was arrogance. She believed her safety net made her untouchable. The janitor, Roberto, found me there one night at 10 p.m., surrounded by printed reports. "Ms. Hartman, you shouldn't work so hard. This job, it's not worth your health." I looked up at him, this man who'd cleaned these offices for 15 years, who'd seen dozens of careers rise and fall. "Did you know about Lila before it happened?" He hesitated, then nodded. Mr. Porter. He visited many times, always with Mr. Holbrook. They would use the conference room after hours. How long? 2 months, maybe 3. I'm sorry, Ms. Hartman. You were always kind to me. Kindness. In this ecosystem, it was a weakness. But Roberto had just given me something valuable. Timeline, proof of premeditation. I filed it away with everything else I was gathering. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't quit. I wouldn't sue. I wouldn't fade away like they expected. Instead, I would become something they'd never see coming. A patient predator in their midst, gathering strength, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The next morning, I arrived at my cubicle with coffee and a smile. I greeted everyone warmly, even Lila when she rushed past in her new designer suit, late for the meeting she didn't know had been rescheduled. I sat at my desk, filing meaningless reports, looking like a broken woman accepting her fate. They had no idea I was memorizing their every move, documenting their every mistake. The demotion hadn't destroyed me. It had given me the perfect camouflage. From down here in the shadows, I could see everything. And what I saw was an empire built on connections rather than competence. It would make its destruction all the more satisfying. Week 5 in exile. I began my real work. Not the mindless data entry they paid me for, but the meticulous construction of Lila Porter's psychological profile. Every email she sent, every meeting she attended, every laugh that echoed from the executive floor. I documented it all. Her patterns emerged like a map of weakness. She arrived late every Monday, hungover from weekend parties in the Hamptons. She deflected difficult questions by mentioning her father's connections. She had a nervous habit of twirling her hair when lying. Most importantly, she trusted the wrong people, anyone who flattered her, anyone who validated her delusion of competence. I started timing my coffee breaks to coincide with hers, sitting just close enough to overhear her phone calls. That's how I learned about her affair with Daniel Reeves, our biggest client liaison, a married man with 2 kids and a reputation to protect. She giggled through their conversations, oblivious to the leverage she was handing anyone who might be listening. She's going to crash and burn on her own, Janet said over lunch at a quiet bistro downtown. My lawyer friend had become my unofficial strategist. Why not just wait it out? Because by then, the damage will be irreversible. Morrison Industries is already gone. They signed with our competitor yesterday. 3 more clients are wavering. I pushed my salad around, calculating. Besides, I don't want her to just fail. I want her to know I orchestrated it. Janet raised an eyebrow. That's dangerous territory, Amelia. So was demoting me for a Nepo baby. Through the research department's access to historical files, I discovered more. Lila's Harvard MBA. Daddy donated a new library wing the year before she applied. Her previous job at Preston Communications? They were acquired by one of Porter's shell companies 6 months after she started. Every accomplishment in her life had been purchased, not earned, but I needed allies. And I found them in unexpected places. Sharon from accounting, passed over for promotion 3 times despite perfect performance reviews. James from IT, whose innovative system proposals were repeatedly ignored in favor of expensive consultants who golfed with leadership. Roberto, the janitor, who'd watched ethical people get crushed by connected ones for 15 years. None of them knew they were part of my plan. I simply listened to their frustrations, remembered their grievances, and filed away the information they unknowingly provided. Sharon mentioned Lila had been expensing personal shopping as client entertainment. James noted unusual activity in the project budget since Lila took over. Roberto observed late-night meetings between Lila and certain board members that weren't on any official calendar. The breakthrough came through Benjamin Cross, a journalist at the Riverton Business Journal who'd been sniffing around North Point for months. I'd ignored his LinkedIn messages before, but now I accepted his coffee invitation. I heard about your situation, he said, sliding into the booth at a diner on the outskirts of town. Brutal, but not surprising, given North Point's history. History? 3 similar cases in the past 5 years. Accomplished women pushed aside for connected incompetence. But nobody talks. They all sign NDAs, take severance, disappear. I didn't take severance, and I didn't sign an NDA about future observations. His eyes sharpened. What kind of observations? I slid him a folder, nothing traceable to me, just public information arranged in a particularly damning pattern. Client losses since Lila's promotion. Project failures. The expense irregularities that were technically accessible to anyone who knew where to look. Interesting, he murmured, flipping through pages. But I'd need more, something concrete. Keep watching, I said. Sometimes the most interesting stories develop slowly. Back in my cubicle prison, I maintained my defeated facade. When Lila swept past in her latest designer outfit, I offered a weak smile. When former peers excluded me from meetings I'd once led, I appeared grateful just to still have a job. Even Marcus, in our final conversation before he ended things, believed I'd given up. "You're not the woman I fell in love with," he said over the phone, too cowardly to break up in person. "You're right," I replied. "I'm something else now." He didn't understand that wasn't defeat in my voice, it was evolution. The Amelia he'd known, the one who believed in fairness and merit, she was gone. In her place stood someone harder, smarter, infinitely more dangerous. Someone who understood that in this game, the only rules were the ones you could enforce. That night, I stood at my apartment window, looking out at Riverton's lights. Somewhere in those glass towers, Lila was probably at another networking event, laughing too loudly, drinking too much, never noticing the ground shifting beneath her feet. She thought she'd won, that my demotion was the end of the story. But I'd spent 5 weeks studying her every move, mapping her vulnerabilities, identifying the exact pressure points that would make her carefully purchased life collapse. I had allies she didn't know existed, information she didn't know I possessed, and most importantly, the patience she could never imagine. The profile was complete, the weaknesses identified, the allies positioned. Phase 1 was over. Tomorrow, I would begin my ascent from the ashes. And Lila Porter wouldn't see me coming until it was far too late. The opportunity came disguised as grunt work. Richard needed someone to compile assessment reports for the quarterly board meeting, tedious work that Lila had obviously refused. From my cubicle, I volunteered immediately, my voice carrying just the right note of desperate eagerness. "I'd be happy to help. Mr. Holbrook, I could have it ready by Thursday." He barely looked at me. "Fine. Just make sure it's accurate." What he didn't realize was that he'd just handed me access to every major client's contact information and project status. More importantly, the board meeting meant FaceTime with people who mattered, people who existed outside of Richard and Porter's sphere of influence. I worked on those reports like they were holy scripture. But I did more than compile. I crafted a subtle narrative within the data. Client satisfaction scores from my era versus the past 2 months. Project completion rates before and after the restructuring, revenue projections that told a story of slow decline masked by creative accounting. Thursday's board meeting was held in the glass-walled conference room on the 20th floor. I arrived early, setting up presentations with the precision I'd once applied to million-dollar pitches. Board members filtered in, most barely acknowledged me. But Catherine Walsh, the CFO of a major pharmaceutical company and the board's newest member, paused. "Excellent visualization of the quarterly trends," she said, studying my slides. "Though these client retention numbers are concerning." "Thank you, Ms. Walsh." I tried to present the data as transparently as possible. She gave me a long look. "Weren't you the senior project director? I remember your presentation on integrated media strategies last year. Brilliant work." "I've been reassigned to research," I said, maintaining professional neutrality. "It offers a different perspective on operations." Her expression suggested she understood exactly what had happened. Board members like Catherine Walsh didn't get where they were by missing subtext. During the meeting, I stayed silent in the corner, taking notes like a good assistant. But when Lila stumbled through her presentation on the Morrison Industries loss, blaming market conditions rather than her incompetence. I saw Catherine's eyes flick to the data I'd prepared. The real data. After the meeting, I timed my elevator ride to coincide with Catherine's. Just the two of us, descending from the executive floor. Your data tells a different story than Ms. Porter's presentation, she said quietly. Data doesn't lie, Ms. Walsh. It simply reflects reality. She handed me her business card. If you ever want to discuss alternative perspectives on the media landscape, call me. The next week, I orchestrated 3 chance encounters with major clients during my lunch breaks. At the coffee shop Harrison Blackwell frequented, I happened to be in line when he arrived. Harrison's company had been with North Point for 8 years, most of them under my management. Amelia. His face lit up. I heard you were traveling. Just reassigned, research department. It's giving me time to work on some independent projects. Independent projects? He leaned in, interested. Harrison had always respected hustle. Market analysis, emerging trends in digital integration. Actually, I pulled out my phone. I just finished a report on maximizing ROI in multi-platform campaigns. Not for North Point, they're not interested in innovation anymore, but you might find it useful. I sent him the file, 20 pages of insights I developed during my late nights, strategies North Point should have been offering but wasn't under Lila's leadership. This is exceptional, he said, scrolling through it. We're actually looking for someone to consult on our Q3 campaign. Would you be interested? Privately, of course. Yomaz, I'd have to review my non-compete clause, but for consultation work outside North Point's scope, I think it could be arranged. Within 2 weeks, I had 3 major clients requesting my private consultation. Nothing that violated my contract. I was careful about that. But enough to remind them what competence looked like, what they were missing under Lila's chaotic management. The beauty was Lila's reaction. She knew something was happening, but couldn't pinpoint what. Her paranoia manifested in increasingly erratic behavior. She accused Sharon of sabotaging budget reports. She demanded IT monitor employee emails, which James delayed implementing with convenient technical difficulties. She even confronted me one afternoon by the printer. I know what you're doing, she hissed, her perfume overwhelming in the small space. Filing reports? That's literally my job now. Lila? Don't play dumb. Harrison Blackwell mentioned you. So did Rebecca Chen from Meridian Tech. Yo, they're allowed to speak to former colleagues, unless you're suggesting North Point owns their social interactions. Her face reddened. Stay away from my clients. Your clients? I kept my voice perfectly level. I thought they were North Point's clients. And I'm still a North Point employee, aren't I? Just in a different capacity. She stormed off, heels clicking like angry punctuation marks. But I'd seen the fear in her eyes. She was starting to realize that Daddy's money couldn't buy her competence, and the clients were beginning to notice. That evening, I met Benjamin Cross at our usual diner. 3 clients are considering moving to competitors, I told him, but they're waiting to see if North Point makes leadership changes first. And if they don't, then someone might need to report on the mass exodus, the shareholder lawsuits, the questions about board oversight. He smiled slowly. You're playing a long game. The only game worth playing, I replied. Lila Porter thinks she won because she took my position. But positions are just titles. Power is about relationships, reputation, and results. She has none of those. I paid for our coffee and stood to leave. Keep watching. Ben. The real story is just beginning. The first strike came on a Tuesday morning, precisely 8 weeks after my demotion. I'd waited for the perfect moment when Lila was presenting to the Whitmore Foundation, a $10 million account she'd inherited from me. The night before, I'd sent an anonymous tip to their procurement department about discrepancies in North Point's recent billing. Nothing fraudulent, just Lila's sloppy oversight, charging premium rates for junior staff, double billing consultation hours, expenses that didn't match deliverables. All technically within contract, but ethically questionable. From my cubicle, I watched Lila rush past at 10:47 a.m., 47 minutes after the Whitmore meeting should have ended. Her face was pale, her phone pressed to her ear. Through the thin walls, I heard her in the bathroom, voice shaking as she called her father. They asked about billing irregularities. No, I don't know who told them. Daddy, you have to call someone. By lunch, the whispers had started. The Whitmore Foundation was conducting a full audit, not just of their account, but of North Point's practices over the past quarter, exactly the period of Lila's leadership. Sharon from accounting stopped by my cubicle, her expression carefully neutral. Holbrook wants all financial records from the Whitmore account. Funny thing, your old reports are the only ones properly documented. Lila's are incomplete. How unfortunate, I said, continuing to type. I always believed in thorough documentation. I'm sure you did. Sharon's slight smile suggested she knew exactly what was happening. He wants you to help reconstruct the timeline, given your familiarity with the account. Perfect. Now I had legitimate access to compare my management with Lila's, all at Richard's request. The second strike came through Benjamin Cross. His article in the Riverton Business Journal was subtle, titled Leadership Changes and Client Relations, a North Point Case Study. He never mentioned Lila by name, but the timeline was damning. Every client loss correlated with the recent restructuring, every missed deadline traced back to new management strategies. Lila confronted me in the parking garage that evening, catching me as I walked to my car. That article, you planted it. I pulled out my phone, recording openly. Are you accusing me of speaking to journalists, Lila? Because that sounds like attempted intimidation of a colleague. She stepped back, noticing the recording. Stop it. Stop what? Doing my job, following Richard's direct orders to help with the Whitmore audit. I kept my voice steady, professional. Or are you suggesting I should refuse to assist with company business? You know what you're doing. Yes, I'm surviving after you took everything from me, legally, professionally, without violating a single company policy. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. The difference between us, Lila, is that I earned my position through competence. You inherited yours through connections. Guess which one holds up under scrutiny? She actually stamped her foot, like a child. My father will... What? Call Richard? Richard, who's now facing a board inquiry about the Whitmore audit? Richard, who needs someone to blame for 3 major client losses? I smiled coldly. Your father's influence only extends so far. The third strike was the most delicate. Daniel Reeves, Lila's married lover, received an anonymous email with screenshots of her very public Instagram posts from their business trips. Her in a hotel robe at 2 a.m. Champagne glasses for 2. Location tags at romantic restaurants. Nothing explicit, but enough for a man with a wife and reputation to protect. He ended things immediately, professionally and personally. Worse for Lila. He withdrew Reeves Industries' contract renewal, citing strategic realignment. Another $8 million account gone. The dominoes were falling faster now. Catherine Walsh called an emergency board meeting. The agenda, leaked to me by Roberto, who'd cleaned the boardroom and seen the briefing materials. Review of Q2 performance and leadership accountability. I prepared a comprehensive report, not as an attack, but as a helpful employee responding to the crisis. Recommendations for Client Retention, I titled it. Every recommendation highlighted what we used to do successfully, my strategies versus current failures. I sent it to Catherine directly, copying Richard with innocent professionalism. I thought this might be helpful for the board discussion. I wrote, I've included historical data for context. Lila was unraveling publicly now. She screamed at Sharon over the financial reports. She accused James of sabotaging her presentations. She even confronted Roberto about spying, which he reported to HR. Each outburst was documented, filmed on phones, whispered about in break rooms. But the killing blow came from an unexpected source, Thomas Porter himself. Lila's father arrived at North Point on Thursday afternoon. I watched from the lobby as he stormed into Richard's office. Their shouting match carried through the walls, Porter threatening to pull his connections, Richard firing back about fiduciary responsibility and shareholder lawsuits. The best part? I hadn't orchestrated this. Lila's own incompetence had created a situation even Daddy couldn't fix. The Whitmore audit had revealed enough questionable practices to trigger an SEC inquiry. Not criminal, but embarrassing enough to end careers. That evening, as I filed my last report of the day, my computer pinged. An email from Catherine Walsh. The board has concerns about recent developments. We're forming an emergency transition committee. Your insights would be valuable. Please attend tomorrow's meeting at 9 a.m. Come prepared to discuss your recommendations for stabilizing client relationships. I read it twice, then deleted it. No evidence trail needed. Tomorrow. I would walk into that boardroom not as a research assistant, but as the solution to a crisis I'd carefully cultivated. Every document would support my competence. Every metric would highlight Lila's failures. Every board member would see the obvious answer to their problems. The assistant who'd been wrongfully demoted, who'd maintained professionalism despite injustice, who just happened to have the expertise to save them. Checkmate was coming, and Lila still didn't see it. The boardroom tension on Friday morning could have been cut with a knife. I arrived 15 minutes early, my best suit pressed to perfection, carrying a leather portfolio containing 8 weeks of meticulously gathered evidence. Catherine Walsh nodded as I entered, gesturing to a seat at the table, not along the wall where assistants sat, but at the actual table. Richard's jaw tightened when he saw me. Ms. Hartman is here to provide historical context, he said through gritted teeth. Ms. Hartman is here at the board's invitation, Catherine corrected coolly. We need someone who understands both the problems and the solutions. Lila burst through the doors 5 minutes late. Her designer suit wrinkled, her eyes wild with panic. She'd clearly been up all night trying to prepare a defense. The contrast between us was stark, her desperate disarray versus my calm preparation. Before we begin, Thomas Porter's voice boomed from the speakerphone. He was participating remotely, probably from his lawyer's office. I want to address certain unfounded accusations about my daughter. Mr. Porter, Catherine interrupted, you're no longer on this board. You're here as a courtesy, nothing more. The room fell silent. I opened my portfolio. If I may, I began, projecting the first slide. The client exodus began exactly 53 days ago. Here's the timeline. Each slide was a dagger. Morrison Industries, loss due to incorrect market analysis. Whitmore Foundation, under audit for billing irregularities. Reeves Industries, contract withdrawn citing strategic concerns. 3 more clients actively shopping for new agencies. These are lies, Lila's voice cracked. Someone has been sabotaging. Ms. Porter. Board member William Chen interjected. Are you suggesting someone else prepared your presentations, filed your reports, managed your client relationships? She opened her mouth, then closed it. The trap was obvious, either admit incompetence or accept responsibility. I continued, my voice steady as a newsreader. The financial impact is approximately $37 million in lost annual revenue. The reputational damage is harder to quantify, but evidenced by this morning's Business Journal article questioning Northpoint's stability. That article was planted. Lila stood, pointing at me. She did this. She's been undermining me since you took her job without qualifications? Catherine's voice was ice. Ms. Hartman has been filing reports in the research department. Are you suggesting a junior researcher has more influence over million-dollar clients than the strategic development director? Richard tried to salvage the situation. Perhaps we're being hasty. Lila is still learning. Learning. William Chen pulled out his phone. I have 17 text messages from clients asking if Northpoint is in crisis. We don't have time for learning. I pulled out my final document. I've prepared a recovery plan. Immediate outreach to wavering clients, restructured account management, and a media strategy to counter the negative press. Implementation could begin Monday. And who would implement this? Catherine asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. The board would need someone with existing client relationships and proven track record, I said. Someone who understands both the damage and how to repair it. Lila laughed bitterly. You're actually suggesting yourself? After orchestrating? She stopped, realizing her mistake. The room leaned in. Orchestrating what, Ms. Porter? Catherine's voice was dangerously quiet. Please, tell us what Ms. Hartman orchestrated from her cubicle in research. Lila looked around the room, finding no allies. Even Richard avoided her gaze. Her father's voice crackled through the speaker. This is a witch hunt. I'll sue. You'll do nothing. Catherine stood. The SEC inquiry ensures that any lawsuit would trigger discovery. And I don't think you want investigators looking too closely at how your daughter got her MBA or her previous positions. The death blow. I hadn't known Catherine had that information. But she'd done her own investigation. The board had come prepared for war. I need a break, Lila whispered, her face ashen. We all do. Catherine agreed. 15 minutes, Ms. Porter. Mr. Holbrook. Please prepare your explanations. Ms. Hartman, stay. We have questions about your recovery plan. As the room emptied, leaving me with Catherine and 2 other board members, I maintained my professional composure. Inside, my heart was racing. This was it. The moment everything pivoted. You knew, Catherine said quietly. You knew we'd reached this point when you sent me that first report. I knew the truth would surface eventually, I replied carefully. I simply ensured it was properly documented when it did. William Chen laughed. Remind me never to get on your bad side, Ms. Hartman. I don't have a bad side, Mr. Chen. I have a professional side and an unemployed side. I prefer to remain professional. Catherine smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. The committee will need a recommendation for interim strategic development director while we search for a permanent replacement. Interim. I raised an eyebrow. Unless the interim proves exceptional, of course, then the search might be very short. When everyone reconvened, Lila's chair was empty. Richard explained she'd felt suddenly ill and left. Her resignation would be on his desk by Monday. Motion to appoint Amelia Hartman as interim strategic development director. Effective immediately. Catherine announced. The vote was unanimous, even Richard's hand rising in defeat. I stood, gathering my materials with the same steady hands that had signed my demotion papers 8 weeks ago. Thank you for your confidence. I'll need access to all client files immediately to begin damage control. Whatever you need, Catherine said, then, loud enough for Richard to hear. It's good to have competent leadership back in place. As I walked to the elevator, heading up to the executive floor, not down to my cubicle, I passed Lila's abandoned office. Her personal items were still scattered across the desk. The designer bag, the framed photos of Hampton parties, the nameplate she'd probably ordered the day they promised her my job. By Monday, they'd all be in a cardboard box, just like mine had been. But unlike me, she wouldn't be coming back. Monday morning arrived with surgical precision. I stood in what had been Lila's office, now stripped bare, at 6 a.m., watching the sunrise paint Riverton's skyline gold. The nameplate reading Strategic Development Director would arrive by noon. But I had work to do first. The plan's final phase required total devastation, not just professional removal. Lila had taken everything from me. I would ensure she had nothing left to rebuild from. At 7 a.m., I sent the first email to all staff. Team restructuring and client recovery initiative begins today. Individual meetings scheduled throughout the week. Professional forward-looking, no mention of the Friday massacre. At 8 a.m., Benjamin Cross's exposé went live on the Business Journal's website. Not the subtle piece from before, but a full investigation. The Porter Files. How nepotism nearly destroyed North Point Strategies. He had everything, the doctored MBA credentials, the shell company that acquired Preston Communications, even quotes from former colleagues about Lila's incompetence. The source was listed as internal documents obtained through whistleblower. At 9 a.m., Richard Holbrook received a registered letter from the SEC. The Whitmore audit had revealed enough irregularities to warrant formal investigation. Specifically, investigations into the board's hiring practices and potential securities fraud related to hiding material losses from shareholders. At 10 a.m., I was meeting with Harrison Blackwell. Officially now, in the executive conference room. "Amelia, I have to ask," he said, studying me carefully. "Did you plan this?" "Plan what, Harrison? Lila's incompetence, her father's corruption, Richard's poor judgment." I pulled out a contract renewal. "I plan to survive unjust treatment and serve our clients despite obstacles. Everything else was just consequence meeting opportunity." He signed the renewal, adding 2 years to our previous terms. "Remind me to never underestimate you again." By noon, 3 more clients had confirmed their retention. Each meeting followed the same pattern: relief at my return, questions about the chaos, and renewed contracts with better terms. North Point needed the wins. I delivered them. At 2 p.m., the real destruction began. An anonymous package arrived at the office of Daniel Reeves's wife. Not the Instagram photos, but hotel receipts, credit card records, and a particularly damning love letter Lila had emailed to her husband's work account. The same package went to 3 major gossip blogs and the country club where the Porters held their membership. Sharon from accounting knocked on my door at 3 p.m. "There's a situation at reception." Lila stood in the lobby, mascara streaking her cheeks, designer bag, clutch-like armor. Security flanked her. She'd been banned from the building, but somehow slipped past. "You destroyed me," she said as I approached, her voice raw. "My reputation, my family's name, everything. I documented reality, Lila. You destroyed yourself the moment you accepted a position you hadn't earned. My father's having a heart attack because of the stress. The SEC froze his assets. Our friends won't return our calls." I stepped closer, keeping my voice low enough that only she could hear. "Your father destroyed careers for sport. You took my position as a game. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? I could expose you, tell everyone how you planned this. With what proof? Every action I took was legal, professional. And in response to your incompetence..." I smiled coldly. "Besides, who would believe you now? The disgraced Nepo baby crying conspiracy?" Richard appeared, his face haggard. The board had given him 30 days to resign or face personal liability in the SEC investigation. "Ms. Porter, you need to leave." "This isn't over," she hissed at me. "Yes, it is." I pulled out my phone, showing her the afternoon's headlines. Her affair splashed across tabloids. Her father under federal investigation. Even her Hampton friends distancing themselves with carefully worded statements. She crumpled then, the fight leaving her body. Security escorted her out, but not before she turned back one last time. Was it worth it? Destroying lives for revenge? "You destroyed my life for convenience," I replied. "I rebuilt it through competence. The fact that your destruction was necessary for my reconstruction? That's just poetry." The glass doors closed between us. The lobby erupted in whispers, but I was already walking back to the elevator. Back to my office, my real office, on the executive floor. At 5 p.m., Catherine Walsh called. "The board is impressed, the bleeding has stopped, clients are returning, we're prepared to make your position permanent. I'll need full autonomy in hiring and restructuring. Done." "And Richard's position when he leaves?" A pause. "You're ambitious." "I'm qualified, and North Point needs leadership that earned their position. We'll discuss it, but Amelia?" Her tone shifted. "Don't let revenge become your only motivation. You've won. Make sure you remember how to do something other than destroy." That night, I stood in my office, CEO announcement pending, looking out at the city. Lila's personal items sat in a cardboard box by the door, waiting for pickup. The same type of box I'd carried out weeks ago. The difference was, she wouldn't be coming back. Her father's influence was gone, neutralized by federal investigation. Her reputation was destroyed, splattered across every tabloid and business journal. Her trust fund was frozen, her social circle evaporated, her future in any legitimate business ended. I'd won. Completely. Devastatingly. The Porter empire had fallen, and I'd built my own from its ashes. Tomorrow, I'd send a single message to the industry, posted on my newly verified LinkedIn. Excited to announce my permanent position as Strategic Development Director at North Point Strategies, with expanded responsibilities for corporate leadership transition. Let them all understand what that meant. Cross the woman who earned her position, and she won't just survive, she'll ensure you don't. 6 months later, I stood behind the podium at North Point's annual shareholders meeting, delivering my first address as CEO. The transformation was complete. From cubicle exile to corner office, from humiliation to absolute power. This year marks North Point's strongest performance in a decade. I announced to the packed auditorium, client retention at 94%, revenue up 37%, stock price doubled. The applause washed over me like validation incarnate. In the front row, Catherine Walsh nodded approvingly. She'd personally orchestrated my CEO appointment after Richard's disgraceful exit. Something about recognizing authentic leadership born from adversity. The Wall Street Journal had called it the most dramatic corporate comeback of the year. Fortune magazine ran a cover story. How Amelia Hartman saved North Point from nepotism's poison. They didn't know half of it. I'd rebuilt everything Lila destroyed and expanded beyond my original vision. The Morrison Industries contract? Won back with a personal apology tour and innovative strategies. The Whitmore Foundation? Not only retained, but doubled their investment. Even Reeves Industries returned. Daniel Reeves sheepishly signing contracts while avoiding eye contact. My office, Richard's former sanctuary, had been completely redesigned. Gone were the old boys' club leather and mahogany. In their place, clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a single piece of art. A phoenix rising from ashes. On my desk sat one personal item. The cardboard box I'd carried out that humiliating morning, now bronzed and displayed like a trophy. Ms. Hartman? Sharon, now my chief financial officer, knocked. Your 3 p.m. is here. I'd promoted every ally who'd helped, knowingly or unknowingly. Sharon, James, even Roberto now headed building services with a substantial raise. Loyalty, I'd learned, was worth more than credentials. The door opened and my visitor entered. I'd been expecting this moment for months. Thomas Porter looked like a ghost of his former self. The SEC investigation had drained his wealth, his connections, his health. He stood in my office, this man who'd once orchestrated my downfall, now begging for mercy. Ms. Hartman, he began, his voice brittle. I've come to discuss Lila. There's nothing to discuss. She needs a job, any job. No one will hire her, the scandal. The consequences, I corrected. She's facing consequences. She's my daughter. And I was someone's daughter too. Someone who watched me nearly lose everything because your family thought power was inherited, not earned. He pulled out an envelope, a check with too many zeros. Please, just give her something. Data entry, reception, anything. I stood, walking to the window, making him wait. Below, Riverton pulsed with ambition and struggle. Winners and losers, predators and prey. I'd been prey once. Never again. No. I'll go to the media. Tell them how you orchestrated. Tell them what? That I documented incompetence, that I presented facts to the board, that I saved a company from your daughter's destruction? I turned back, meeting his desperate eyes. Besides, who owns the media narrative now? The disgraced family under federal investigation? Or the CEO who rescued a major corporation? He crumbled into the chair, suddenly looking every one of his 70 years. You've destroyed us. No, Mr. Porter. You destroyed yourselves the moment you believed consequences didn't apply to you. I pressed the intercom. Security, Please escort Mr. Porter out. He's no longer welcome in this building. As security arrived, he turned at the door. This isn't justice. It's revenge. Sometimes they're the same thing. After he left, I returned to my desk. To the speech I'd been writing for next week's Women in Business Summit. They wanted inspiration, motivation, hope. I'd give them something better. Truth. Success isn't about working harder or being better. I'd written. It's about understanding power, how to recognize it, how to take it, and how to keep it. Sometimes that means playing by the rules. Sometimes it means rewriting them entirely. That evening, alone in my office as Riverton's lights began twinkling below, I opened my laptop to check the anonymous blog I'd been following. Lila Porter's Daily Struggles. She was working at a small nonprofit in Delaware, using her mother's maiden name, making barely enough to cover rent. The latest post showed her taking the bus, her designer clothes long sold, her entitled confidence replaced by hunted paranoia. Perfect. I closed the laptop and poured myself a glass of champagne, Dom Perignon, the same vintage Lila had expensed for her unnecessary client dinners. The bubbles rose like tiny victories, each one representing a calculated move in my 8-week chess match against entitlement. Standing at my window, overlooking the empire I'd claimed, I raised my glass to the reflection staring back. The naive project director who believed in fairness was gone. In her place stood someone harder, sharper, infinitely more dangerous. Someone who understood that in the corporate world, you were either the knife or the throat. I'd chosen to be the knife. The city spread before me like a promise. There would be other Lilas, other entitled nepotism babies who thought birthright trumped merit. But now I was ready for them. I'd written the playbook on calculated revenge, turned survival into an art form, transformed humiliation into rocket fuel. They'd demoted me for a Nepo baby. They'd tried to bury me in obscurity. Instead, they'd created something far more dangerous. A woman who understood that mercy was luxury she could no longer afford. Never underestimate someone with nothing to lose and everything to prove, I said to my reflection, draining the champagne. Because while you're celebrating your stolen victory, we're planning your calculated downfall. The office lights dimmed automatically at 10 p.m., but I remained, silhouetted against the cityscape. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, new entitled enemies to dismantle. I was ready for all of it. This wasn't just a comeback story. It was a masterclass in revenge, served at exactly the right temperature, ice cold. The Nepo baby had fallen. Long live the queen who earned her crown. Thank you so much for listening to this story of calculated revenge and corporate justice. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this tale of sweet revenge resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel for more stories that explore the darker side of ambition and the price of power. Share your thoughts. Have you ever faced injustice at work? How did you handle it? Let's discuss in the comments below.